when we talk about these things like, well, gee, cheaper college, healthcare, better safety net for food, employment, things like that. One of the big countries that has done all these things is the Netherlands, right? Now, the Netherlands did this, and what ends up happening is the Netherlands has one of the biggest wealth inequality gaps. I think it's the biggest of any country in the world. So their whole argument on the counter side is, well, look, you did all these social programs, these sort of socialist things, right? And Netherlands is sort of a liberal sort of bastion in that kind of sense. But it didn't fix the wealth gap. They still have the biggest wealth gap of any nation. But let's look at that for a second, because I want to look at this real quick. So here's a little bit on that. I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but we'll just get into it a little bit.
Netherlands, a picturesque nation filled with windmills, tulip fields, and coffee shops. The nation is looked to by many as an extremely forward-thinking place that practices some pretty progressive policies. The nation has an incredibly strong social security system with universal healthcare, robust retirement pensions, as well as allowances for maternity leave. And these kinds of policies are mirrored in other areas as well. The nation is home to some relatively high tax rates, and the protections for employees are very strong, almost to the point that people joke it's impossible to be fired in the Netherlands. So, this kind of looks like a liberal paradise, right? Well, it would be if it were not hiding a dirty little secret. This postcard perfect little nation is, according to the World Bank, the most unequal place on Earth, and the extent of the inequality is simply staggering.
So that's not entirely true. It has the most unequal wealth gap, but what it doesn't have is the most unequal income inequality gap. So income equality is actually very low in the Netherlands. And here's a study real quick where who's this, Berkeley? Their economics department. So high tax rates for the wealthy. She's talking about the Dutch economy of the Netherlands. High tax rates for the wealthy and increased government spending are increasingly being seen by the vocal majority as clear-cut solutions for wealth inequality within the country. Phrases like "eat the rich" have been circulating on social media, blah, blah, blah. But she goes into this. The Netherlands is often credited as some of the most modern and forward-thinking economies in the world. In fact, many progressive policies like high tax rates, high government spending are being proposed to the U.S. as commonplace from the Netherlands. The Netherlands has income tax could reach up to 49.5%, blah, 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 some characteristics, da, da, da. So she goes into this. So this thing is called the Gini index, Gini, and that figures the wealth gap and income inequality gap disparities, right? So when she talks about, so the Dutch economy is regarded as a liberal paradise, blah, 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 progressive policy, but the Gini coefficient is 0.9. So 0 to 1 is the Gini index, 0 to 1. 1 being the worst gap, 0 being the best, right? So 0.9 is super high. Okay? But what you have to understand is the history of the Netherlands. Because back during the War of the Roses and the Renaissance, there was this little thing called the Dutch East India Trading Company. And they traded spices, silk, all this stuff all over the world. And it was one of the first companies in the world to offer shares. So you could invest in the company. So the people in the Netherlands who invested in it are all incredibly rich today. Their families are incredibly rich. And they've just gotten richer and richer on their investments. Even though they make about the same as everybody else, their investments have made them richer and richer and richer. So to sit there and go, well, look, yeah, taxes haven't fixed this. Well, income taxes fix the income disparity quite a bit. But it didn't fix the wealth disparity. Well, what could fix that? Oh, I don't know, wealth taxes? If it worked with income tax, why wouldn't it work with wealth? So their argument is, well, income taxes didn't fix the wealth disparity. And I'm like, yeah, because they weren't supposed to.
Right.
That's not what they're designed to do. They were to fix the income disparity. And so, yeah, they have a Gini coefficient of 0.9 on that. Where was it? So the Netherlands income inequality, the top 20% of people in the Netherlands, the highest earners, earns 4 times the income of the bottom 20%. Okay? Take the US. The top 20% in the US earns 16.65 times the bottom 20%. So our income disparity is a lot higher. Our wealth disparity isn't as high because you know why? We haven't been around since the Renaissance. We didn't have any of that. So it's only been the last 2 centuries you could build wealth in this country for these families. But now that gap is getting larger and larger in this country. Why? Because they can earn more income. And the wage gap has gotten bigger and bigger as wages have gotten stifled. Now, if you put in higher income taxes now, we could prevent that and prevent a lot of the wealth gap growth. Because most people in America that are getting that higher wealth gap are getting it through income. As opposed to the Netherlands, where by the time they implemented it, those people were already filthy rich. So unless you take their money from them, it doesn't change anything. So it's one of those where it's like they like to throw that argument out there, but they're conflating wealth and income. You can be poor and make a huge income, and eventually you'll be fairly rich. You can be incredibly wealthy and make no income, and you'll always be incredibly wealthy. They're different things. They're different issues.
Right. And they're being lumped together in a way that's not completely appropriate. That doesn't totally make sense.
Right. Right. So let's see. So let me do this. Is it in here? Or is it just this one? Hang on 1 second. Yeah, this is just the wealth gap with the Gini index. This is just Wikipedia. I'm just making it easy. Let's see if we can get that going. All right, here we go. So as you can see from this chart, at the top is the Netherlands, right? At 2019, it's what was it? 0.902. Russia, Sweden, right? The United States, right? But as you go down and down and down, I mean, you got to look at some of the history of some of these countries, right? So like South Africa is always really high. Let's see if we can go down and find something. A lot of these are undeveloped countries, so there's not a ton yet. You know, Greece is really low because they've had a lot of redistribution of wealth. Japan is really low, and part of the reason Japan's really low is because after World War II, we distributed the United States and the Allies. We redistributed a lot of the wealth in Japan after World War II. So it changes depending on what when you're looking at what the history is. Like France is still fairly low. Why? Because during the French Revolution, what did they do? They killed most of the rich people and distributed the wealth. Right? Remember the guillotines?
Mm-hmm.
So it depends. I mean, so when you're talking about the wealth index, you got to go back centuries. You can't sit there and go, well, you had these policies last year, therefore they didn't work. Well, no, you got to go back a couple hundred years. You know, in the case of like the Netherlands and Switzerland and those places, you got to go back 500 years, back when they had royalty. So anyway, I just think that was just a funny argument that you see all the time, and it's just kind of ridiculous, where they're trying to make this point of
not looking at why.
yeah, Well, and
Have you noticed a pattern to all of these things? It's just wanting to make a blanket statement on the surface level of some data, but not asking why or how
right,
we got the data.
right. Well, the bigger thing is it's a solution in search of a problem instead of a problem in search of a solution. It's completely backwards from how we're taught to think. We follow the evidence to a conclusion. These people have a conclusion and they're trying to make the evidence fit. See, income taxes don't help wealth inequality. Yeah, they're not supposed to. You didn't solve the problem and you didn't disprove my argument. Wealth taxes could potentially help wealth inequality. Right? But to sit there and go, well, see, the income taxes didn't work in the Netherlands, it's like, yeah, they did, because their income tax Gini index is like 0.2.
Right.
It did work. It worked gangbusters. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It just because it's like okay, I repaired your carburetor, and it's like great, but the air conditioning's not working. I'm like, well, you didn't pay me to fix the air conditioning, bro.
You weren't even trying to.
Right. I just fixed the one thing.
Right.
So you can't sit here and bitch but that's what they're trying to do with this argument. So